everybody, this is Tim from the Nerdosphere. We have a special guest here, Paul Tremblay. He is a world-renowned writer. He won the 2015 Bram Stoker Award for great work in horror. And he's the author of one of my most recent favorite books, A Head Full of Ghosts. So, Paul, thank you for taking a few minutes to talk to us and our fans. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. Glad to be here from my messy office that's become my classroom as well.
Yeah, I definitely definitely understand that with quarantine right now.
Yeah.
So, hey, Paul, I was hoping you can just kind of kick us off here. And a lot of our listeners love to write and are really interested in the process that an author goes through with writing. So I'm hoping you just kind of give us a little bit of background and maybe where your love for writing came from and when you started to really pour yourself into your writing and take it more seriously.
Yeah. So, I think my path to writing is probably, I think it's different than most people. I certainly as a child wasn't like writing stories and stuff. I had an active fantasy life. Like I wanted to be Larry Bird. I was very far away from ever having become that though. But anyway, I was a math major in college.
Okay.
So I didn't start messing around with writing until right after grad school. I just got my master's degree in math. And I'd fallen in love with reading during those years in grad school because I was very far away from my girlfriend. I had nothing else to do, who's now my wife. So I know I just had this weird, inexplicable itch to try writing a story after, when I was 23 at the time. And for really 5 years, I wasn't all that serious about it. I was messing around with writing music too. But right around like 2000, 2001, I figured out I was a better writer than musician and started taking it more seriously. But it was still a sort of very long, slow learning process and, climb, for lack of a better phrase. I sold some short stories, from like 2000 to 2004 or 5. And then I managed to get an agent in 2006. And it's just been like a steady, slow turtle winning the race kind of thing. Or I don't know if I've won the race, but at least I'm in the race.
Sure. Absolutely. Great. So I noticed your most recent book, Growing Things, is a collection of short stories, actually. And the books that I discovered you with were full novels. So can you walk us through like your decision process on do I want to write a short story or a novel and how that changes the mechanics of how you write?
Sure. I've been in novel mode for a while, so been sprinkling in short stories here and there. I will say when I first started writing, it was almost exclusively short stories. It's kind of how I learned how to write. But that's not necessarily the process every writer has to go through. I know plenty of writers have only done novels. Like Grady Hendrix, for example, doesn't write short stories. He only writes novels. He's done very well, obviously. So with Growing Things, it was just more of a matter of like, oh, geez, I've been writing these novels. In between, I've written a few short stories. I had a big glut of short stories from about 10 years, that I hadn't collected into a book yet. And it just felt like the right time. For me personally, part of it was trying to give my publisher another book because I find it very hard to write a novel a year. So it was my plan to try to space out some of the novels a little bit. But I'm also very proud of the stories in that collection. And I did write 2 stories that are unique or special to that collection, hadn't appeared anywhere else. And both stories have connections to my prior novels. So I thought that was kind of a fun way to hopefully position the collection for people who read the novels, and they might get a kick out of the connections in the stories. But if you haven't read the novels, there's 19 stories, so you certainly would not be lost if you hadn't read the novels first.
Perfect. That's great. Do you have a preference on writing novels versus short stories?
They're so different. I don't know. Realistically, I know that novels are going to kind of be like what, if I want writing to be my day job, would be the way to go. The truth is, there are very few people who can make a living from writing short stories, and that list, I think, is decreasing with each passing year. I do love that the short story is, I can finish one in maybe 2 to 4 weeks.
Sure.
There's more of that instant gratification where the novel is like a long marathon. It typically usually takes me 12 to 15 months to write a complete and good draft of a novel. And even though I'm up to 8 now, every time I'm in one, it feels like I'm never going to finish it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like the feeling of being done with a novel. It's not the same as being done with a short story. Being done with a novel is it's a feeling I'm sort of hooked to and sort of keeps me going on to the next one.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, by the way. Short stories seem to be a dying breed, which is why I was so excited to grab Growing Things, because the only author that I'm really plugged into right now that's doing short stories besides you is Joe Hill. He's got a couple of great collections as well. So it's refreshing to see people pouring into a short story. And I think as a reader, they're really a great change of pace where you don't have to feel super invested and you can kind of churn through the book at your own pace.
Yeah, no, it's weird. You would think with a shorter attention span, people would gravitate towards short story collections. But I think what happens is in a short story collection, you have to go through the acclimatizing process for every story. Like you have to relearn, oh, here's a new setting, here's a new set of characters. If there's 19 stories, you have to do that 19 times, as opposed to a novel. You don't have to do it once and you're just sort of swept away, and so I get that part of it. I will say for the paperback of Growing Things is going to come out later this summer. And for the paperback, I wrote like a recommendation list of other short story collections, which I may tweet out to at some point, soon. And they're not all horror collections. They're all short story collections that I've read and enjoyed through the years. Cause I do very much enjoy short stories.
Absolutely. So I discovered you, Paul, through Stephen King. Our listeners know I'm a huge Stephen King fan. I follow him on Twitter, and he tweeted out huge praise about several of your books. So I'm just curious, how does it feel to see some of the most iconic writers of all time praising your work? Is it surreal, or how does that make you feel?
Oh, yeah. I mean, thank you very much, Uncle Steve.
Yeah.
The first time, I've been very fortunate that Steve has read a bunch of my books now, but, he read A Head Full of Ghosts and tweeted about it August 18th, 2015. I've got the date memorized. Oh, no, 19th. Oh, no, I've lost the date. But anyway, yeah, he tweeted about how A Head Full of Ghosts scared the living hell out of him, which is just amazing. And then, I don't know, I got emotional when I saw the tweet. I became a reader, never mind a writer, because of Stephen King. And, since then, we have gotten in touch through email, and he's been super supportive, and he's such a sweet, generous guy. So, no, it's one of my highlights of my career, his praise and support.
That's very, very cool for sure. So the book that I saw him tweet out about was what you just mentioned. It was A Head Full of Ghosts. And I finally sat down and invested time in reading that over the past couple of months. And it completely blew me away. For our listeners, if you're looking for a book that has an ending that's just going to leave your jaw on the floor, where you're just like, wow, A Head Full of Ghosts is a huge recommendation of mine. So I'm just curious, where did you get the motivation to write A Head Full of Ghosts? And where did that come from?
Thanks. I appreciate it. For that book, I felt like it was one of those rare, like, eureka moments that writers dream about. It was February of 2013, and I was actually stuck in the middle of this other novel. I was only like 100 pages into it, and it wasn't going well. And it took me like a year to get those 100 pages. So I was doing quote unquote research, but I was really just looking for excuses to not work on that book. And I happened to read a collection of essays. There's a wonderful specialty press called Centipede Press, and they make wonderful, beautiful, like coffee table, almost like books. But anyway, they have a series of books called Studies in the Night Film, and they had a book about the movie The Exorcist. And within the book, there were reviews, interviews with the cast, but also there were all these essays about the movie. And then there was one journalistic piece too that was investigating the supposed real life inspiration behind the book and the movie, which doesn't exist, or at least not as described. So I was reading that, and I actually literally put it down. I was like, I never really thought about the movie in political terms and stuff like that. And I was like, geez, no one's really written a possession novel in a while. Hollywood always continues to pump out like the PG-13 Exorcist possession movies. I was like, how would I write a possession novel? And it just really just almost like blew up in a week. Like I almost had like the whole story just from that point. I mean, I got really lucky. Like I knew it was going to be the two sisters, and knew there was going to be like a reality crew, and like before the reality crew shows up, when they're there, and then after. So yeah, I had the idea, and I'm just glad I didn't screw it up too much.
Well, you definitely didn't screw it up. I saw recently that A Head Full of Ghosts is starting to make way and is about to hit cinema here in a couple of years. So can you tell me about what that feels like to see one of your books starting to make its way to the big screen, and then also how involved you're going to be in helping write that?
No, it's very exciting. And I'm not involved at all, really. Like, certainly not officially. Like, contractually, I have no say over anything. The producers have been asking for my input a little bit here and there. It's not a thing until the day they start filming. So we're definitely closer now than we've ever been before. So fingers crossed. I mean, there's a great director attached, Scott Cooper. He was supposed to have a movie come out this month, but they're pushing it off to the fall called Antlers. Sure. It looks great. And Margaret Qualley is slated to play adult Mary, which is really exciting. So yeah.
Very cool.
Like I said, I mean, I know a lot of friends who've had things come really close and then it just falls apart at the end. So, I mean,
sure.
They've had this for 5 years now, so hopefully it makes it all the way to the finish line.
Well, it's definitely got some momentum. Like you said, Scott Cooper, great director. He did Hostiles. He did Crazy Heart. I think he's going to do some great work here for you. So, Paul, when you look back over your career, is there a book or a character in a book that just still really tugs at your heartstrings? As a parent, I'm always asked, like, hey, which one of your kids is your favorite? And that's like an impossible thing to ask. I don't know if that's the same for you with your books or not.
Oh, with my books? Jeez. I don't know. Like, I still have a soft spot for like firsts. Like, my first novel that I got published with a big publisher was called The Little Sleep, which is actually going to be reissued next year, which is exciting. So I have a soft spot for that book. And A Head Full of Ghosts really sort of is what, gave me a second chance as a writer career-wise. So, that book's always going to be, feel super important to me. So, I love Mary and Marjorie are, probably two of my dearest characters. Although I will say the novel that's coming out this summer, I really enjoyed these two adult women characters who are friends that, go through the ringer. Romola, or Rams is her nickname, and Natalie. So no, yeah, like you said, it's sort of like choosing between favorites. It's hard to do.
It's really, really hard. So can you tell us a little bit about the book that's coming out in July, I believe?
Yeah. So it's called Survivor Song. And it's about an outbreak of a super rabies virus in Massachusetts. And which sort of eerily parallels with what's happening now in some ways. I mean, it's a totally different virus, but
sure.
The book, it really focuses on a personal story between the two women that I mentioned. But, it is about sort of like the local response and, people in quarantine. And it's kind of weird to see like some of the things that I put in this book that I wrote like a year and a half ago actually playing out now, which is just kind of strange. But, hopefully I think, the virus is different enough. It's a more thrilling read and maybe even like cautiously hopeful. So I think if people were to read it now, they'd be okay with it. I guess the last thing I would say is like the main crux of it, besides this weird super rabies virus, is that Natalie is 8.5 months pregnant. Her husband is killed by someone with rabies and she's bitten. So the rest of the book is like a race against the clock to see if she and her friend Romola, who's a doctor, see if they can get Natalie, vaccinated, see if they can save her, save the baby. And it's almost really told in real time. Like it takes place over 6 hours.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, I saw the premise of that and it was eerily familiar based on what we're doing right now for sure. Yeah. So that had to be surreal to see some of the things that you wrote about come to fruition here over the past couple of months.
Yeah, no, I mean, my sister is a nurse in a big city hospital in Boston. So obviously right now I'm very concerned about her.
Absolutely.
But, she was a big help with research for the book, and talking about like what individual hospitals, what their responses would be. I mean, that's only part of the book. Like really the second half of the book, it's Romola and Natalie sort of out and about. There is a scene in the hospital where you get some of that response, but hopefully it's fun. So far the response to the book has been really positive and, hopefully people like it.
That's great. So all of our listeners, be on the lookout for that book coming out this summer. Paul, I've got one more quick question for you before you go for the day.
Sure.
You kind of mentioned The Exorcist as being a motivator or an inspiration for your book, A Head Full of Ghosts. What are some movies or other books that have really just inspired you or transformed your view on the genre?
Well, so for me, some formative stuff, just besides like reading, Stephen King, The Stand. One short story, Joyce Carol Oates's Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? Helped turn me into a reader first. Like when I read that story as a math major in college, I was like, oh, I didn't know people wrote things like this. Another book, Mark Danielewski's House of Leaves, super inspiring. I mean, to stick with the Head Full of Ghosts themes, that book riffs on The Exorcist, but I also pull a lot from Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which is a book I've reread, a bunch of times. Movie-wise, I would love to mention Lake Mungo, which is an Australian movie, came out, just over 10 years ago. I would highly recommend people seek that out. My book, Disappearance of Devil's Rock, is definitely a little bit of a nod or a riff on Lake Mungo. And maybe more recently, a book that just blew me away, and it'll be a collection of short stories, is Mariana Enriquez's Things We've Lost What We Lost in the Fire. No, Things We've Lost in the Fire. I always screw up titles.
Okay.
So there's a bunch, but I mean, there's so many really great horror writers out there right now, like John Langan and Nadia Balkin, Laird Barron, and did I say Nathan Ballingrud? I mean, there's just so many doing really wonderful work. I hope people explore, because I think we're sort of in a golden age of horror fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd say for me, the transformative movies, at least, were like your original Bride of Frankenstein, and then The Exorcist 3, which I saw that you recently just did a live stream on, which was really cool. And then the classic Halloween. I mean, those are just like 3 different takes on horror that just really transformed my view of the genre for sure.
Now we made it all the way to the end before we got to
that's no problem at all. Paul, again, thank you so much for your time today. For all of our listeners, be on the lookout for his new book coming out this July. And if you're looking for a great scary story, A Head Full of Ghosts, it will absolutely blow your mind. Paul, thanks again for your time. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
Thank you.